Is it? That's Scott's jacket. For sure it was going to see me Tuesday night.
Oh, another thing is this item right here.
I don't know, but, I did try.
So Alan provided these 3 ordinance suggestions, and
But
one of us, I think, needs to set that up. And what I think is, hey, 3 ordinance changes. One provides definition, one provides, and then the other 2 incorporate that definition or that.
Yeah, but they all go into ordinance 5.
Yeah, no, right. So it's, basically that's what you have in front of you. And my intention is that this was supposed to be a public hearing tonight.
Oh, okay.
But it didn't get advertised. So this will be hey, this is information, take it home, and in March we're going to have a public hearing.
Okay. I just thought it was ordinance maintenance
And then we wouldn't need a public hearing.
without a public hearing.
Yeah, right. Alan's,
Because we're just defining what we mean.
yeah, well, it's Alan's suggestion. I don't think it's a bad one, because especially since it affects commercial bay. It'd be good to give those folks as much opportunity, I think, to chime in as we can.
There's a few doctors.
Even if they don't.
Well, when we talked with them, they all agreed on ordinary high water.
Yeah,
That's where they're measuring it from now, and that's where they want to be measured from.
Yeah, and I think that there's no issue personally. No, I think it's just a matter of
son probably lived there,
Here tonight?
true, not here.
Okay.
He's in Madison.
Yeah, okay, whatever, yeah. Okay, I just assumed he was just gonna take it and do it, so I didn't prepare, I didn't even make copies to bring.
Oh, no, that's right. So do you want me to set it up?
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Okay, and then, how's it going?
Good.
Okay, well, it's 7. We have a quorum. So I'm going to get us going. Okay, I'm going to call the February 15th meeting of the White Bear Lake Conservation District Board to order. We have a quorum. Thank you for being here. And we've called to order, so that's items 1 and 2. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. And does anybody have any adjustments that they'd like to make to tonight's agenda? And I'll start. I'm going to, since Mark's not here and the LUC was unable to meet, I'm going to take the Lake Utilization Committee items off the agenda, and we'll have to deal with those in March. Any other? Okay. Would anybody like to make a motion?
So moved.
Okay, motion, and Mike, you want to move your mic in? Mike, okay, we have a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion?
Does that still give us enough time to get them approved before the docs go in?
I think so, but let's talk about that for a moment. The idea is that the docs can't go in within the next 30 days because of ice. I think that's the idea. Now, it's possible that if we have a very warm stretch of weather and the ice is out, that we could call a special meeting for the LUC and for the board. to deal with them at that time. But hopefully things will wait until our March meeting. But that's a good question. Does that seem reasonable as an approach? Okay. Any other further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, we have an agenda. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the January meeting minutes. Does anybody have any adjustments to those minutes? Okay, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the January meeting minutes. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, those pass. Public comment time, we allow 15 minutes for items that aren't on tonight's agenda. Anybody have an interest in taking advantage of those 15 minutes? No. All right, we'll move on to new business. So new business, the item on the agenda is discuss wake boat findings from U of M study. So the U of M study came out. That was shipped around to everybody via email, I think, a link anyway. Any thoughts or any discussion anybody would like to have about that?
Yeah, just a few things. Well, the study came out, and really the bottom line of that study was that a wake boat at 425 feet has the same wave energy as a regular boat at 200 feet. So basically what that said is that the wave energy can go out twice as far, at least, maybe a little bit more. But they didn't do anything on the effects of that. There'll be future research to talk about how that actually affects shorelines. That's unknown. So at this point, now we already have an ordinance that covers it indirectly. It says, no person shall operate a watercraft in such a manner that its wash or wake will endanger, harass, or unnecessarily interfere with any other person or property. So that would include a wake boat. One would assume that a wake boat could do it a lot farther off. It's not necessarily a very enforceable thing, because say if the sheriff was out there, he'd have to see somebody being interfered with. He couldn't just say, oh, that boat is too close. Right. So an argument could definitely be made for adding an ordinance that talks about the number of feet one of those wake boats thing. It's hard. It's from the research. It's hard to set a number, but it appears to be like twice as far as a regular boat. So at this point, we would have to see if anything happens to the legislature with this research, if anything happens at Lake Minnetonka. And we would have two options, I think, right now. One is just sort of wait to see how it all plays out, do some education, highlighting the fact that wake boats really need to be, we could put that up on the website, rather than what we have on there now, which is the industry's recommendation of 200 feet. It should probably be twice that, I would think. But we could do an education push that way, or we could actually get into the business of writing an ordinance if we had a way to do that. The effect of doing that, it might push the legislature or everybody else, because that's very often what you see in legislation, is that cities will start doing stuff, and then that puts pressure on the legislature to have something uniform. If we did that, you could imagine that when we did a public hearing on that, the industry representatives would show up. So we'd have to have our ducks in a row to try that.
Okay. Anybody else have any discussion? Meredith?
Yeah. So I thought it was pretty interesting. I wasn't surprised to read that longer, heavier boats have larger wakes, because most people notice that when they're in the water. But I was surprised how fast those larger waves got smaller or attenuated as they approached the shore. I was expecting a larger difference. At the 200 feet current recommendation, it's only a 6-inch difference for the wake boats and fully loaded conditions to the smallest boat they tested, and only a 2.2-inch difference for the cruising condition, which that surprised me. I didn't think that those waves would attenuate so fast. One thing I was thinking about is, does White Bear really have an erosion problem? I'm not sure about that. I haven't heard any complaints except for perhaps when the water levels were at their highest. And then another question I thought about was, they had talked about armored shorelines that experience a lot of wind action. The sediment settles so that it's pretty stable. White Bear is a pretty windy lake. Do we have armored shorelines? I have no idea. So some things I'd like them to look at in the future is how does the wake boat compare to a really windy day on White Bear? Is that a lot more energy hitting the shoreline than, say, a 20-mile-an-hour windy day? And then does White Bear have shorelines that are at high risk for erosion? And then I'd like to see the wake boat compared to bigger boats, because I imagine there's boats of the same size and weight as a wake boat. They're probably producing the same wave energy that aren't wake boats.
Would those boats be, and I'm ignorant about it, would those boats be on White Bear Lake, boats that are bigger?
There are some really big boats on White Bear, yeah.
Got it. I think that's all good. I would imagine that, you know, there are probably people that have riprap along their shoreline in places, and like you said, we've heard of erosion issues, but generally that's when the level's really high, which maybe would be exacerbated by a wake boat. I don't know. But that's all good. Anybody else have anything to? Okay, so question, what do we want to do at this point? And we don't have to take any action on it tonight. We could all just kind of digest what we just heard. And if we didn't get a chance to review the report, take an opportunity to do that. And we could have further discussion at a future meeting. But does anybody have any strong interest one way or the other at the moment? Mike?
I wouldn't give up on the idea at all. I think it's very pertinent, and it's timely now, and it is a problem. But I understand that there's, wakeboarders, actually wake surfers out there that, really enjoy the lake doing that, but they have to consider, and Scott, touched on ordinance. We do have something if they're blatantly being, causing a problem. But in general, I guess, I don't know, it's a hard one. Maybe just keep studying it. Meredith, you got a good handle on it, kind of picking up on the issue.
Doesn't the DNR currently have a law that says, you're responsible for your wake and the damage it causes? So I guess any ordinance would be on top of that, right?
Yeah.
And the law, which I haven't, it says damage or wake causes trees the same as damage caused by an actual collision. There's no reference to feet. So it's I guess, if we do anything, is it just a Band-Aid on top of a Band-Aid, or is it something actually new? So.
Well, I think one thing is, if the board, and I'm not saying we should do this, but one idea that Scott raised is if we set a distance from shoreline that wake boats were allowed to operate on White Bear Lake, then that might be something that the law enforcement out on the lake would be easier for them to monitor. But it seems to me, anyway, that if we were to set that distance now, we might be setting it without adequate information, and maybe there is some value in waiting a little bit to see how things develop. I think the education component, as opposed to bringing a hammer right away, seems positive to me. I don't know what that looks like, but it seems like a positive idea. And then it'd also be nice if we could somehow, and I don't know if this is just using you as an example, Meredith, sorry, but if this is just Meredith asking these questions of the people who prepared the study, or if the board could prepare something and throw that over the fence to the people that did the study to see if we can get some, input on future work, or maybe some response from work they've already done. That might be an option.
Yeah. Well, we did give them some money for this.
So they owe us.
A couple $1,000. So, it would not be unreasonable to write a letter with questions based on what you have. We'd have to build it up, and then in the process of them answering the questions, and they say, well, that's future research. Okay, are you going to do it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not totally convinced that we have a problem when our water levels are lower. Residents, if anyone watches this, email us if you think you have some erosion, but I haven't heard feedback from anyone that I know that they're having erosion problems.
It would be good to get input from the people that actually live on the lake and are potentially impacted by the boating activity on the lake. Okay, so what do we do? Okay, I'll suggest that, Meredith, could you summarize your ideas and in some format that we can start thinking about putting that into a letter and sending it to the people that did the study?
I'd be happy to do that.
Oh, thanks for that. Any other activity that we should take up at the moment? Like on the education side, is that putting something on the website, maybe social media kind of stuff? Is that what we would do?
Yeah, I could modify what's out there, which is basically right now is an industry provided piece of graphic that we put on our website. Mm-hmm. I could do something a little bit different. I started working on that.
Okay.
And I can do that. Now, if you want more input from people around the lake, we'd have to figure out how to get that input. Well, they'll read it in the paper, I'm sure.
That would be helpful.
Yeah. So,
another thing, could we put a note on, and not that, I don't know how much impact this would have, but could we put a note on the website saying, please provide input if you, I guess pro and con, for the, I don't know, input on boats using the lake? And,
yeah, I mean, not that many people look at the website unless they have a reason to go there, so
Sure.
you really would have to push
Yeah,
it.
we get about 1,000 page views a week on Facebook and Instagram.
Oh, good.
There's not that much, not many comments are made, but there's a lot of views.
If we were to ask a specific question,
I can try.
about erosion.
Yeah, I can put a
or-
link to the study. I can ask questions about erosion.
Yeah,
I'd be happy to do that.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit hesitant to ask for comments because you know what kind of comments you get on social media, but you could sift through it and see what the real comments are.
Yeah. Okay, any other discussion or ideas on this topic?
I'll just add, this is kind of anecdotal, but I read Jeff Forrester's the executive director of the Minnesota Lakes and Rivers, which is an environmental group, and his main point was it's going to take education, of educating people on the process, which Scott alluded to. He kind of wasn't for a ordinance or a law right now because, to your point, it's very hard to enforce. We must remain X feet away from docks or shoreline right now, and I don't know how that's enforced if it has been. It's education, I think, is what it comes down to.
All right, well, we'll go with that approach first. Okay, well, thank you. And Meredith, thank you for your input as well, and everybody else. Okay, so we'll move on. Unfinished business, finalized executive board elections. So the The nominations for the chair, vice chair, treasurer were opened in January, and the nominations on the table right now are myself as chair, Mark Gans as vice chair, and Diane as treasurer. So that's the slate on the table. And Diane?
I would like to withdraw my nomination for treasurer secretary and nominate Mike Peranto for that position.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So the slate at the moment is me as chair, Mark as vice chair, and Mike Peranto as treasurer. Does anybody else have any nominations? Anybody have any additional nominations? Are there any additional nominations? I think I'm supposed to ask it 3 times. Okay. Haven't heard any, so I will call the vote. All those in favor of the slate in front of us, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, that passes. So we have board member. Thank you, Mike and Mark.
And Brian.
Okay, then the next item is the review revised ordinance language to include definition of ordinary high water marking and location where to start the measurement from for the maximum 300-foot dock. And I'll just say that one thing that I think would be good for the board to start thinking about is, and I know this is a nit, but what we're talking about here is 300-foot for the ADUA, the authorized dock use area. And yes, typically the docks might go out that far, but they don't necessarily have to go out that far. It's maybe a nit. So everybody, I think, received the ordinances that Alan had put together with input from the executive committee and from Mike Peranto. And basically, those ordinance changes would identify what we mean by ordinary high water level. So one of them is a definition of ordinary high water level. And then the other 2 are incorporating ordinary high water into a couple of ordinances for clarification. What I'd like to do is I'd like to have a public hearing on this in March. And in the meantime, if everybody could look at this and come prepared to that with any suggested changes, or if you've looked at it already and you have any changes, we can have that discussion now.
I have one question, just for my knowledge. And it's not with any of the changes, but when we define, there's 2 situations that we can have the length of the dock. They say one is a distance of 200 feet, right? And then there's the second scenario where it's out to 200 feet, it's less than 4 feet deep. Then you can go out as far as you can until you hit 4 feet, but not as far as 300, right?
Yeah.
Now, if I'm already at 200 feet, but I have 8 feet at the end of that dock, can I go out further, or how does that? Because I wasn't clear on that, or because it kind of implies there's a rule there, but maybe not.
Mike, do you have any input on that? I could tell you my understanding is I think they can go out beyond the 200.
Even if you have the depth. It's more or less to clarify for the shallower shores for the dock, I guess, for that second scenario.
That's what I think. And Mike, am I hitting that?
Well, generally speaking, because docks are expensive and it's a lot of work to put in, that they're usually not any longer than they have to be unless they're a commercial dock or sometimes an easement dock. So it kind of takes care of itself. But as long as they're limited at 300, I think we're
I
good.
just didn't know if it implied, like, here, you're at 200 and you got 8 feet, you're stopped. Because then that would open up a whole another.
Yeah. At 200, if you had 8 feet, you probably wouldn't even be out that far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it.
But if you want to pay somebody to keep putting in the dock, I suppose you just stop them at 300.
Got it. That's the only thing I had. It was fine.
Yeah, just to clarify what this is, okay, Alan sent out two ordinances, or the ordinance 22 or 2022-01 and 02.
And 03.
There's an 03.
And here's Scott.
That's the date, isn't it?
Okay. All right, so that's an update. But anyway, it looks like the only change in all of this is the phrase "as measured from the OHW," and then a definition. Okay, so there's really not a whole lot to this,
True.
because we always said 300 feet, right?
Right.
But we just never defined 300 feet from where.
True.
And the OHW, as defined in the other ordinance, is actually a DNR definition, or it's taken from that. So there's not a whole lot to this.
I think it's just clarification.
Yeah. I don't know if you need a public hearing on this, because the 300 feet is still 300 feet.
Well, let's talk through that. I think the reason I would advocate for a public hearing is because it affects Commercial Bay, and because we've given those folks a lot of opportunities to provide input, and to me, it seems like giving them this last opportunity before we finalize these may have some value. That's why I would advocate for a public hearing.
Okay.
Diane?
Well, and also I think it's important because people, where do you start through 300 feet? And so a lot of people just start wherever they want. And so I think this is a really specific clarification as to where you start your dock. So this will affect people. So I think we should have a public hearing to talk about that.
Okay. Well, that's the plan for March. Okay. Any other discussion at the moment?
Doesn't this elevation number fluctuate? Correct?
It's set for White Bear Lake. Now, over time, if it's in my understanding, it's an average.
Right.
Over a long
Like a
time.
10, 20-year period?
Oh, maybe longer.
Longer, okay.
And I think theoretically it could go down or go up, but I don't know what it would take to make that change in the real world.
Yeah.
Like how many years?
But it's the DNR that sets it.
True.
I mean, I suppose you could say that, it says for White Bear Lake, the elevation has been set at 924.89. It's set by the DNR. Though I guess that would just be a clarification.
Yeah.
It's not us by this ordinance that's setting it.
And it's been at that level for forever,
Yeah.
forever.
Okay. Additional discussion? All right, let's move on. So we'll take that up in March. Reports, action items. The executive committee did meet. We discussed these changes in the ordinance, and a sign noting St. Germain's Bay. That is still moving forward at a pace. And that was about it for what we talked about. Any questions on that? Okay. Then the next is Lake Quality Committee. Mike?
Nothing.
Okay. Any questions for Mike? When's ice out, Mike?
Not many months, but nothing. I did apply for a grant, but I haven't heard from it.
Okay. Okay. Lake Utilization Committee, Mark's not here, so we'll move on. Lake Education Committee, Scott and Meredith.
Yeah, we are, the next event is the cleanup event. The first Saturday, I think it's the 12th. It's probably in the minutes last month, yeah, but it's coming up on that first.
So the first Saturday is March 5th.
Yeah.
Second Saturday
12th.
is the 12th. So it's the 12th?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the cleanup. It's always after the last day that they can be out on the lake overnight. And that's about it on the social media update.
I'd encourage anyone here that's around on the 12th to join in the lake cleanup. If you take any pictures, email or text them to me and I'll post them on our social media. Thank you. I'm going to add more to our social media from what we talked about tonight. Hopefully get you some comments on erosion.
Okay. Any
All right.
questions for Scott and Meredith?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Next item, Treasurer's Report. Diane?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Treasurer's report for February 2022. I'd like to make a motion to accept checks 4742 through 4746.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept those checks. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, that passes.
Thank you.
Any questions for Diane? All right, and thank you, Diane, for being our treasurer up till now. Okay, so the next item is Board Council Report. Alan's not here because he is out of town, but he asked me to let you know that there are two, I think he said BWI cases that he's engaged in. So he'll keep us posted as those progress. Mike?
When you're driving on the lake in the wintertime on the ice,
Yeah.
is it a BWI or a DWI?
You know, I asked that question of Alan several times, and I'm sure it was BWI. But so anyway, DWI, BWI was on the lake, and somebody was impaired. 2 people apparently, or that's the charge. Okay, so that's Board Council Report. Item 14 on the agenda, announcements. That's Kim, and Kim's not here tonight. So we're on to the last item on the agenda, adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you all for coming out.